Everyone laughed when the girl paid $5 for a crippled dog at a muddy auction. But what she didn't know was, that broken animal wasn't just a stray. He was a forgotten soldier, and what he'd do next would change her life forever. Among the crowd stood Lily, a small girl no older than 8, her hand tightly gripping a wrinkled $5 bill. Her coat was too big for her, sleeves rolled up, patched at the elbows. Her pigtails were uneven, and her eyes darted nervously between the animals and the people. Most didn't notice her. She was just another farmer's child, dragged along for the day. But unlike the others who came for pigs or goats, Lily had come with a secret purpose. Her eyes had locked onto something that made her heart ache the moment she saw it. At the far end of the lot, chained to a crooked post, lay a German shepherd. His fur was matted and dirty, one leg stiff and unusable, and an old scar cut across his muzzle. His eyes didn't beg. They didn't even move. They just stared, flat and empty, like someone who had long stopped expecting kindness. People walked by without a second glance. Some wrinkled their noses. One man even scoffed. Poor thing ought to be put down. But Lily didn't look away. She stood there, unmoving, like the world had gone quiet, and only she and the dog existed. The auctioneer cleared his throat and tapped the microphone. "Next up," he mumbled, "Lot 47, one male German shepherd. Condition, poor, injured leg, unknown history." His tone was disinterested, like he'd already written off the outcome. Starting bid, $1. Silence followed. No one raised a hand. The dog didn't react either. He lay still, barely blinking, his breathing slow but steady. The auctioneer shrugged. "No takers? All right, moving on. I'll take him." The words were small but sharp enough to cut through the crowd. Heads turned. Lily stepped forward, holding up her crumpled bill. "I have $5. Her voice wavered slightly, but she didn't lower her hand. The crowd broke into murmurs. A woman nearby whispered, "Whose kid is that?" Another laughed under his breath. $5 for that dog?" The auctioneer hesitated, looking around. No one else raised a hand. After a long pause, he leaned into the mic. "Sold for $5. Lily approached the dog slowly, her boots crunching against the straw. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a piece of bread she'd saved from breakfast. As she knelt, the dog turned his head ever so slightly. Their eyes met. His dark and guarded, hers soft and trembling. She held out the bread. He didn't move at first, then slowly sniffed the air before gently taking it from her palm. It was the first time he'd accepted anything from anyone in a long while. Behind her, the laughter faded. Whispers turned into silence. Even the auctioneer looked unsure of what had just happened. Lily didn't care. She crouched next to the dog, one hand resting lightly on his back. "I'll call you Bruno," she whispered. "Don't worry, you're coming home with me now." And just like that, with nothing but $5 and a heart full of stubborn kindness, Lily walked away with the dog no one wanted, completely unaware of the miracle she had just set in motion. The walk home felt longer than usual, though the distance hadn't changed. Lily's boots sank into the muddy path as she led Bruno with a makeshift rope tied gently around his neck. He didn't resist, didn't pull, he simply followed, limping with every step, his injured leg dragging slightly behind. The autumn wind carried the scent of falling leaves and the distant smoke of chimneys, but all Lily noticed was the soft shuffle of paws beside her and the strange silence that had settled between them. It wasn't the silence of fear, it was something heavier, like carrying a weight no one else could see. Her little fingers gripped the rope tighter whenever she felt him slow. She would pause, wait patiently, then gently coax him forward. "We're almost there, Bruno," she whispered, as if he could understand. Maybe he did. His ears twitched now and then when she spoke, and he glanced at her with eyes that no longer looked hollow, just tired. She wasn't sure why, but being near him made her chest ache in a way she'd never felt before, not like scraped knees or bedtime loneliness. This ache felt older, like she had reached out and touched someone else's pain. When they finally reached the farmhouse, her father was already standing on the porch, arms crossed. His expression was unreadable, the kind of look that hovered between worry and frustration. Lily didn't meet his eyes. She kept walking until she reached the porch steps. "He needs a place to sleep," she said simply, glancing up. Her father's jaw tightened. "Lily, we can barely feed ourselves." What were you thinking?" She looked at Bruno, then back at her father. "He needed someone, and I had $5. The words came out with quiet conviction. There was a pause, a long one, the kind that made the wind seem louder. Then her father sighed and rubbed his forehead. "Fine, but he stays in the barn. And you feed him from your share." Lily nodded quickly, grateful. "Thank you." She led Bruno around to the barn behind the house, the old structure groaning under its own weight. The floor was layered with straw and smelled of hay and rain. She cleared a corner, made a bed with torn sacks, and filled a tin bowl with water from the pump. Bruno lay down slowly, groaning slightly as he adjusted his injured leg. Lily sat cross-legged beside him, not speaking, not moving, just watching his chest rise and fall. He wasn't just tired. He was broken in ways she couldn't yet understand. But she didn't need to understand everything. She just needed to be there. She reached out a hand and brushed a clump of dirt from his ear. He flinched, then relaxed. The tiniest of bonds was forming, not from trust, but from shared silence. That night, as the sun slipped below the horizon and shadows stretched across the field, Lily snuck out with an extra piece of bread and a blanket. She found Bruno exactly where she left him, still awake, eyes glinting in the moonlight. "I don't care what people say," she whispered, draping the blanket over his back. "You're not broken, just lost. Like me." Bruno blinked slowly, then rested his head on her lap. Somewhere in that quiet barn, between a girl with nothing and a dog with no one, something fragile but powerful took root. It wasn't just the beginning of friendship, it was the beginning of redemption. For both of them. Morning sunlight broke through the cracks in the barn, lighting up the dust that floated gently in the air. Bruno was still curled in the straw, blanket half draped over his back, eyes barely open but alert. Lily sat beside him, half asleep, her cheek resting on her knees. She'd been there since dawn, afraid he might disappear if she left him alone, but he hadn't moved. He was still there, still hers. When the rooster crowed and the clatter of pots signaled breakfast, she finally stood, brushing hay from her clothes. "I'll be back," she whispered. Bruno gave the tiniest flick of his tail. At school, the whispers began the moment Lily stepped into the classroom. Some of the boys had been at the auction with their fathers. They'd seen her hand over the $5 bill. "Hey, dog girl," one of them snickered. "Did you name it Fleabag or Trash Can?" Laughter rippled around the room. Lily didn't respond. She kept her head down and walked to her desk. Another girl leaned in and asked, not unkindly, "Is it true? You really bought that injured dog?" Lily nodded quietly. "His name's Bruno." The girl looked surprised. "Why'd you waste your money?" The rest of the day passed in a haze of questions and quiet judgment. Even her teacher paused while handing her a worksheet and said softly, "Lily, I hope you know what you're doing." But Lily didn't need their approval. What she needed was waiting in the barn, healing, breathing, and beginning to trust. Still, the weight of their voices clung to her like cold water, seeping in, chilling her resolve, trying to make her doubt herself. When she returned home, she found her father at the kitchen table, reading the newspaper with a furrowed brow. Without looking up, he said, "Sheriff Daniels stopped by today." Lily froze. "Why?" "Said he heard you brought home a stray from the auction. Asked if I knew it might be a liability." Her heart pounded. "He's not dangerous," she insisted. "He's just hurt." Her father folded the paper and looked her in the eye. "That dog has scars. That's not just from being on the street, Lily. That's from something else." She didn't back down. Scars don't make him bad. Later that evening, as she sat beside Bruno in the barn, she told him everything. About the kids at school, about the sheriff, about how no one seemed to understand. Bruno rested his head on her lap, eyes closed, as if soaking in every word. "They don't see what I see," she murmured. "They don't know you like I do." She ran her fingers gently over his fur, pausing at the edge of one jagged scar that crossed his shoulder. "I think you've been through something awful, but that doesn't mean you don't deserve a second chance." Bruno opened one eye slowly, then nudged her hand with his nose. It was small, almost accidental, but to Lily, it felt like a promise, a beginning. He was still wary, still distant, but he hadn't turned away, and in her heart, she knew that was enough for now. Her love didn't need to be returned instantly. She would wait. She would earn it, brick by brick. The next morning, her father stood in the doorway of the barn, arms crossed again. But something in his posture had softened. He watched as Lily cleaned Bruno's wounds with a damp cloth, humming softly to him. "He let you do that?" he asked. Lily nodded. "He didn't even flinch today." Her father didn't respond right away. Then, quietly, he muttered, "Just be careful, Lily." And he walked away. The world wasn't cheering her on. It didn't understand what she was trying to build out of $5 and a broken soul. But Lily wasn't doing this for applause. She was doing it because she saw something in Bruno that no one else could. Not just pain, not just fear. She saw the echo of something noble, something buried under the weight of memory and time, and she was determined to bring it back to the surface, no matter what anyone whispered. The barn had become more than shelter. For Bruno, it was a place where pain didn't mean punishment, and footsteps didn't bring fear. But healing was never simple. Each morning, Lily brought warm water in a bowl, cleaned his wounds, and sat beside him without forcing anything. She spoke softly, stories about her school, her favorite books, or the wildflowers near the fence. Bruno never replied, but she could feel it in the way he looked at her. He was listening. Still, healing wasn't just physical. Sometimes, when the wind rustled the barn doors just right, he would jolt upright, growl low in his throat, then whimper and tuck his head. Lily noticed it first on the fourth night. She'd brought a new blanket, softer and freshly washed. As she approached, Bruno growled, not at her, but toward the open field beyond the barn. His body froze, muscles tight, one paw lifted as if sensing a threat. But there was nothing there, just shadows and silence. Then he whimpered, curled into a tight ball, and trembled. Lily dropped to her knees beside him, heart racing. "Bruno," she whispered, laying a gentle hand on his back. "It's okay. No one's going to hurt you here." But he kept shaking, his breaths fast and shallow, like he was running from something only he could see. The next morning, Lily skipped breakfast and rushed to the barn early. She found Bruno lying on his side, eyes open, but his whole body tense. His injured leg looked worse, swollen, stiff, and the bandage stained with dried blood. Panic welled in her throat. "No, no, no, not today," she muttered, fumbling to unwrap the cloth. Her hands shook as she cleaned the wound. Bruno winced but didn't pull away. He trusted her now, even in pain, and that trust broke something open in her, a surge of fierce protectiveness no one had taught her, but had always lived in her bones. Her father found her there later, kneeling in the straw with tears on her cheeks and Bruno's head in her lap. "You're late for school," he said gently. Lily shook her head. "He's worse today. I think something inside's hurting more than just his leg." Her father stepped into the barn, looked down at the dog, then crouched beside her. He examined the leg silently, lips pressed tight. "It might be infection," he said, "or a break that healed wrong." He didn't say it, but Lily could tell what he was thinking. This might be more than they could handle alone. That night, after chores were done and the house had gone quiet, Lily tiptoed into the barn carrying a flashlight, a jar of salve, and a new pair of socks she'd secretly taken from her drawer to keep his paw warm. Bruno's ears perked up the second she entered. "Shh," she whispered. "It's just me, boy." She sat beside him and gently lifted his leg. He didn't growl, didn't flinch. He just watched her, calm and quiet, as she cleaned him again. "You don't have to be brave for me," she said, voice trembling. "If it hurts, it's okay. I'll still be here." As the days passed, Bruno's body slowly began to respond. The swelling eased, his appetite returned. Just a little at first, then more. He even wagged his tail once when Lily brought him scrambled eggs. It wasn't much, but to her, it was a miracle. And yet, his nights were still haunted. Sometimes he'd wake suddenly, bolt upright with a sharp bark, then whimper and nudge his head into the corner like he was hiding from something no one else could see. One evening, after another nightmare had passed, Lily sat beside him and said, "You don't have to remember everything right now. I'll carry the hard parts until you're ready." She didn't know where the words came from. They just poured out. But Bruno leaned into her, pressing his scarred side against her arm, and let out a long breath. It wasn't trust yet, but it was something real, something growing. In those quiet nights filled with wounds and whimpers, Lily learned something no adult had ever taught her. Healing isn't loud. It's not fast or flashy. It's slow and raw and made of small, silent victories. And in that barn, one little girl and one broken dog were slowly finding their way back to life, together. The air had shifted. Lily could feel it before she even stepped outside. The wind had grown colder, tugging at the trees with sharp fingers, bending them into uneasy shapes. Clouds clung low to the fields, thick and unmoving, like they were holding their breath. The sun had set hours ago, but the moon hadn't risen yet, leaving everything cloaked in an unsettling, starless dark. Inside the house, her father double-checked the locks, while her older brother drew the curtains. "Feels like a storm's coming," her father mumbled. But there was no thunder, no rain, just silence so deep it rang in their ears. Lily stood by the window, looking toward the barn. She had just fed Bruno an hour earlier, leaving him with a warm blanket and his favorite treat, a leftover chicken bone. He'd been doing better that week, walking a few steps more each day, wagging his tail with a little more energy. But now she couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Maybe it was the stillness, or maybe it was how the night just waited, as if watching. She turned from the window and started toward the back door. She stepped out barefoot, flannel pajamas brushing her ankles, and crossed the porch. The boards creaked beneath her as she descended into the grass. The barn stood quietly in the distance, its silhouette barely visible in the dark. She held her breath, listening. That's when she heard it. A low, guttural growl. It sliced through the silence like a warning. Her heart jumped. "Bruno?" she called softly. Another growl answered. It wasn't a cry for help. It was protective, defensive. Something had triggered him, and it wasn't her. She picked up her pace, running through the wet grass toward the barn. As she neared the doors, she saw movement. Bruno was on his feet, standing stiff, head lowered, tail rigid. His ears were pinned back and his teeth bared slightly, the growl rolling from deep within his chest. But he wasn't facing her. He was facing the shadows behind the barn, near the fence line, where moonlight hadn't yet reached. Lily stopped in her tracks, her breath caught in her throat. Someone, or something, was out there. The hairs on her arms stood up. She took a cautious step forward. "Bruno." "It's okay. I'm here," she whispered. Bruno flicked his ears but didn't look away. His eyes were locked onto the darkness beyond the barn. Then she saw it. A figure. Just for a moment. It moved slightly, then stopped. Not an animal, not a fox or a deer. Too tall, too slow, and too quiet. The breath in Lily's lungs froze. A man? Why would someone be out here this late, hiding in the dark? Bruno's growl deepened. He stepped in front of her now, shielding her with his body. Injured leg or not, he was ready to fight. That's when the figure stepped back into the woods and disappeared, gone in seconds, without a word. Lily stood frozen. Then she dropped to her knees and wrapped her arms around Bruno's neck. He was still tense, still trembling slightly, but he allowed the hug. His growl faded into a low whine. He had protected her, without hesitation. Back inside the house, Lily locked the door and drew the curtains. Her father questioned her when he saw her pale face and muddy feet. She told him only part of it, just that she'd heard something, that Bruno had growled. Her father tensed and walked outside with a flashlight, but found nothing. Just footprints by the edge of the barn, not hers, not animal, human. Could have been a drifter, he muttered, but he didn't sound convinced. He doubled the locks that night. Lily slept on the floor beside Bruno that night. She didn't want to leave him alone, not after he had stood like a soldier between her and something that didn't belong in their world. As she curled up beside him, Bruno rested his head on her feet. And for the first time since the auction, she saw his eyes close in true rest, not fear. He had found something worth guarding again, something to protect. That night changed everything. Bruno wasn't just healing, he was remembering, not just who he was, but what he was meant to do. By morning, the world had returned to its usual rhythm. Birds chirped in the distance, dew shimmered on blades of grass, and the sun poured golden warmth across the fields. But inside Lily's chest, the memory of the night before still pulsed. She watched Bruno as he lay near the barn doors, his ears perked and body alert, eyes fixed on the tree line. He hadn't barked, he hadn't chased. He had calculated, guarded, and protected. That wasn't fear, that was instinct, training. Her father came to check on them, glancing around the property. "Nothing's missing," he muttered, then looked at Bruno. "But that dog of yours?" He knew something. Later that day, Lily and her father headed to town to gather supplies. She hated leaving Bruno alone, even for a little while, but they needed fresh gauze and some dog food if he was going to keep getting stronger. At the general store, whispers continued to follow her. Kids smirked, and one man joked, "Still babysitting that crippled mutt?" Lily didn't respond. She'd learned silence was sharper than any comeback. But when they returned home that afternoon, they found the barn door wide open, and the chicken coop in chaos. Feathers floated through the air, hens squawked wildly, and one of the old wooden gates had been torn from its hinges. Lily's father ran ahead, shotgun in hand. But before he reached the barn, Bruno came bolting out, limping hard, covered in mud, but alive. In his mouth, he held a torn piece of flannel fabric. He dropped it at Lily's feet. It wasn't animal fur. It was a sleeve, a man's. Her father picked it up, his face pale. "Someone was here again," he said quietly, and Bruno stopped them. It didn't take long to piece things together. A neighbor's shed had been broken into, tools stolen. There had been similar incidents across the county in recent weeks, mostly during storms or dark nights. No one had ever seen the culprit, until now. Bruno hadn't just sensed danger, he had confronted it. And he had done it alone. Lily crouched beside him, inspecting a small cut near his rib cage. "You did good, Bruno," she whispered. "You did real good." He leaned into her touch, chest rising and falling with a steady rhythm. That night, her father sat on the porch longer than usual. He smoked a single cigarette in silence, watching the moon. When Lily joined him, he didn't speak for a while. Then he said, "That dog's not just any stray." She nodded. "I know." He turned to look at her. "He's been trained, knows how to track, knows when to hold back, when to strike. That's not something you learn in a backyard." Lily stared at the stars. "Then where did he learn it?" Her father exhaled slowly. "I don't know, but someone spent a long time teaching him to be a protector." The next morning, Bruno stood on all four legs without assistance for the first time since the auction. His limp was still there, but less pronounced. He walked beside Lily to the field, sniffing the breeze, tail swaying gently. She watched him from a few steps behind, heart swelling with pride. He no longer looked like a broken animal. He looked like something returning to life, one step at a time. When a flock of geese flew overhead, he lifted his head to the sky and let out a short, sharp bark. Lily smiled. He had a voice again. From that day on, something shifted in the town too. The whispers at school didn't stop, but they softened. A few kids even asked about Bruno. "Is it true he fought off a thief?" one boy asked. Lily shrugged, but the glint in her eyes said enough. "He's just smart," she replied, "and brave." Even her teacher, who once looked at her with concern, now smiled when Lily wrote a short story titled My Silent Guardian. Bruno had become more than a dog, he was becoming a legend. In a small town where news spread faster than lightning, stories about the crippled dog who stopped a break-in traveled far. But only Lily knew the truth. Bruno wasn't just healing, he wasn't just defending, he was transforming. The instincts buried deep within him, shaped by someone, somewhere, were resurfacing. And with every growl, every watchful glance, every brave step, he was no longer just her rescue. He was becoming her protector. It happened on an ordinary afternoon, one of those quiet golden hours when the sun spilled lazily through the barn slats, and Bruno dozed in the warmth. Lily sat beside him, brushing the dust from his fur with a soft comb she'd borrowed from her mother. He had finally started trusting her touch without flinching, even letting his eyes close sometimes. She moved slowly, humming to herself as she worked through the tangles behind his ears. It was peaceful, until the comb caught on something strange near his left shoulder blade. She paused, frowned, and brushed the fur aside with her fingers. There, beneath the coarse hair and scarred skin, was something she had never expected to see. A small, faded black tattoo. Numbers. Letters. At first, it looked like a smudge, but when she leaned closer, her breath caught. It was clearly stamped into the skin. MK912B, she whispered. Her fingers hovered just above it, afraid to touch. Bruno shifted slightly but didn't seem bothered. She ran to the house, shouting for her older brother, Caleb, who had a knack for computers and mysteries. "I need your help," she said breathlessly. "There's something on Bruno's skin. I think it's a code." Caleb followed her back to the barn, skeptical at first. A code? What kind of code? But when she showed him, his face changed. He knelt beside Bruno, carefully parting the fur. "This looks military," he said quietly, "like a unit tag." He pulled out his phone and typed the sequence into a search engine. A few minutes passed in silence as he clicked through obscure pages. Then he sat back, wide-eyed. "Lily, this might be a mark from a classified K-9 program, Special Forces. Dogs used in reconnaissance or detection missions. Some of them were trained for things people don't even talk about." Lily stared at him, stunned. "You mean Bruno was a soldier?" Caleb nodded slowly. "It's possible. Some of these dogs were worth more than vehicles. Trained to track bombs, protect their handlers, even parachute from planes. If he's from one of those units, he's not just special. He's one in a million." Bruno, unaware of the revelation, rested his head back on the straw and let out a quiet sigh. But Lily saw him differently now, not as the broken dog she had rescued for $5, but as someone, something, with a past deeper and darker than she had imagined. That night, she sat beside him, holding a flashlight and her sketchbook. She carefully copied the tattoo onto a page, surrounding it with notes and questions. "Who trained you?" she whispered. "What happened to you out there?" Bruno lifted his head slightly as if sensing her thoughts. She reached out, touched his paw gently. "You don't have to remember all at once. Just know you're safe now." But deep inside, a seed of curiosity had taken root, because the tattoo wasn't just a mark, it was a clue, a door to a story she hadn't yet opened. The next day, Lily approached Sheriff Daniels at the diner. She showed him the sketch, her voice steady despite the nerves. "Have you seen anything like this?" The sheriff's expression darkened. He motioned for her to sit. "Where did you see this?" She hesitated, then replied, "On my dog, Bruno." He rubbed his chin, thinking. A few years back, there was talk of a military transport crash, classified cargo. One of the rumors was about a dog, a special unit K-9 gone missing after an explosion during a convoy ambush. He looked at her seriously. "If your dog's who I think he is, someone might come looking for him." Lily's stomach twisted. The thought of someone taking Bruno away was unbearable. "But he's mine now," she said firmly. "I bought him fair and square." The sheriff didn't argue. "Just be careful," he said quietly. "Secrets like that don't stay buried forever." She left the diner with her mind racing, her heart pounding. Bruno hadn't just wandered into her life. He'd escaped something big. And that tattoo was the proof. Back home, she found him sitting by the barn door, ears perked toward the field. The wind moved through the grass like whispers. She knelt beside him, placed her hand gently over the mark. "Whatever they made you into, whatever they tried to take from you, you're free now. You're mine, and I'm not letting anyone take you back." Bruno didn't move. He didn't need to. His silence said it all. The rain came without warning. Dark clouds rolled in from the hills, and within minutes, the fields turned to mud, and the air filled with the sound of steady, rhythmic droplets. Lily stood at the window, watching the barn, worried Bruno might be cold or frightened. But when she opened the back door to call him, she saw something strange. Bruno wasn't in the barn. He was out in the field, limping through the rain, nose to the ground, tail stiff. His posture was rigid, alert, not like he was wandering, but like he was searching. For something old, something remembered. She grabbed her raincoat and ran after him, boots slipping through the slick mud. "Bruno!" she called, her voice nearly drowned by the storm. But he didn't stop. His head moved side to side as if following invisible signals, and his body pulled toward a spot near the base of an old oak tree. That's where he stopped. That's where he froze. And then, slowly, he crouched low to the ground and let out a single, low bark. Not angry, not afraid, but certain, like he'd been here before. Lily caught up, panting, her heart pounding not just from the run, but from something deeper, a sense that she was watching something sacred unfold. Bruno scratched at the base of the tree with his front paws, ignoring the mud and rain. His eyes had a distant look, like he wasn't seeing the field anymore, like he was back somewhere else entirely. She knelt beside him, unsure what he had found, but not daring to interrupt. Then he stopped scratching and simply stared at the disturbed soil, chest rising and falling in short, rapid breaths. Suddenly, he backed away, ears low, tail between his legs. He whimpered once, then turned and bolted back toward the barn without looking back. Lily stayed behind, confused. She looked down at the patch of ground he'd exposed, just dirt and a few rocks. But something about the way he'd reacted, like the memory of that spot had hurt him, made her hesitate to dig further. She placed her hand on the wet earth and whispered, "What happened to you here?" But the mud didn't answer. Only the wind did, rustling the leaves above her with a haunting sigh. Back in the barn, Bruno lay curled in the corner, eyes wide, body trembling. He didn't respond when Lily entered, didn't lift his head when she knelt beside him. She wrapped a blanket around him, hands gentle, whispering softly, "It's okay. You're safe now." But in his mind, he wasn't in the barn. He was somewhere darker, somewhere with gunfire and shouting, with metal and smoke, and men who screamed his name but never came back. The thunder outside only made it worse. He whimpered again and pressed his head against her chest. Lily didn't leave him that night. She stayed curled beside him, rain hammering the barn roof, thunder rattling the walls. She didn't know what he had remembered, but she knew it wasn't a good thing. Scars on the body could be treated. Scars in the mind, those were harder. "You don't have to go back there," she whispered. "Not alone." Bruno closed his eyes, his breathing uneven but slower now. He wasn't healed, not yet. But she had seen something in him tonight. Not just pain, but a flash of the soldier he once was. And the wound of remembering was the first step toward becoming whole again. The storm had passed by morning, but the ground was still soft and heavy with water. Lily stood at the barn door, watching Bruno doze under the pale light filtering through the slats. He hadn't left her side all night. His sleep had been restless, interrupted by soft whimpers and the occasional twitch. But by dawn, he finally lay still. She didn't wake him. Something inside told her he needed the rest more than anything. She turned to leave, heading to the house for breakfast, when the crunch of gravel stopped her. A black pickup truck rolled up the driveway, unfamiliar and slow-moving. Her father stepped onto the porch just as the truck came to a halt. A man stepped out. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a grizzled beard and a weathered face that looked carved from stone. He wore a worn army jacket and heavy boots, and his eyes scanned the property like a soldier still on duty. Lily stepped back instinctively, unsure of his presence. Her father raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" The man nodded. "Name's Donovan, retired Army. Heard from Sheriff Daniels you've got a German Shepherd with a military tag." Her father stiffened. "You here for the dog?" Donovan looked past him, toward the barn. "I just want to see him, that's all. If it's who I think it is, he saved my life once." Lily felt a jolt in her chest. Bruno? A lifesaver? Her father exchanged a wary glance with her, then gave a small nod. "He's in the barn." Donovan approached the barn slowly, like he was entering sacred ground. Lily followed, her boots squishing in the mud. When they stepped inside, Bruno was already awake, standing. His ears twitched, head slightly tilted. He didn't growl, he didn't bark. He just stared. Donovan froze mid-step. "Oh my God," he murmured, voice cracking. "Rex?" Bruno blinked. Lily frowned. "Rex?" Donovan stepped forward, kneeling carefully. "MK-912B, codename Rex, part of a K-9 recon unit. We were in Kandahar, 2018. There was an ambush. He saved us, twice. Last I saw of him, he was bleeding, limping. We thought he didn't make it." Bruno, Rex, took a tentative step forward, sniffing the air. Then another. Donovan reached out, tears brimming in his eyes. "You remember me, don't you, boy?" Bruno stood inches from him now, still and silent. Then slowly, he pressed his head into Donovan's chest. The soldier let out a shaky breath and wrapped his arms around him. "You made it. You brave, brave dog." Lily stood quietly, her hand covering her mouth, heart swelling with something she couldn't describe. Pride, sadness, awe. Donovan pulled back and looked at her. "You found him?" She nodded. "At an auction, he was hurt. No one wanted him, except me." Donovan nodded, his voice low. He's not just any dog. He's been through hell, lost his unit, probably wandered for weeks, maybe months. He was trained to survive, even without us. But a dog like Rex doesn't just survive. He looks for someone to protect. Lily looked at Bruno, who had now returned to her side, sitting quietly with one paw touching her foot. "He found me," she said softly. Her father joined them in the barn. "So what happens now?" he asked. Donovan stood up, eyes on Bruno. "I won't take him. He's got a new life now, and I can see he's found something worth staying for." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver emblem, an old military medallion. "This was his," he said, placing it gently in Lily's hand. "He earned it, and now he's earned peace." She held the medallion carefully, tears burning her eyes. As Donovan left, he turned once more and saluted. Bruno stood, head high, watching him go. There was no fear, no confusion, only silence and respect. Lily stood beside him, clutching the medallion to her chest. In that moment, she understood. Bruno had lived another life before hers, one filled with danger, orders, and loss. But that life hadn't broken him. It had forged him into something unshakable, a protector. The sun dipped low on the horizon that evening, casting long amber streaks across the field. Lily sat on the porch steps, the military medallion still clenched tightly in her hand. It felt heavier now, not just in weight, but in meaning. Bruno lay at her feet, eyes half closed, the breeze gently ruffling the fur around his ears. He looked peaceful, but her mind was far from it. Donovan's visit had opened a door she hadn't known existed, a door to Bruno's past. And with it came a question she couldn't stop hearing. What if Bruno belonged back in that world? Her father sat quietly beside her, sipping his coffee. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then he said, "You know, I don't think he's just your dog anymore." She looked at him, confused. He continued, "I think he's your partner, like he was someone else's once." His voice was soft, thoughtful. "But it's not about where he came from now. It's about where he wants to stay." Lily stared at the medallion in her hand, its edges pressing into her palm. "But what if someone comes back for him? What if he's meant to be somewhere else?" Her father leaned back, watching the sky turn violet. "Sometimes the people, or animals, who've been through the worst, they don't need to go back to where it all started. They need a place to heal, a reason to rest." She looked down at Bruno, who opened one eye and wagged his tail once, as if agreeing. But Lily wasn't the only one with thoughts of change. The next day, Donovan returned, not with soldiers or trucks, but with a letter from the Department of Defense. It stated that MK9-12B was declared missing in action and presumed deceased. Legally, he no longer existed. Donovan handed her the paper carefully. "This means no one can claim him, not the government, not any program. He's yours, Lily, for good." But he hesitated before adding, "That said, if you ever wanted, there's a place he could go. A rehabilitation facility for retired K9, acres of open land. Former handlers. It's quiet, safe." Lily looked at the document, then at Bruno, who was watching from the barn door. Her heart twisted. He could have space, a place with others like him. But would he be happy there without her? That night, Lily sat with Bruno under the stars. The paper lay beside her on the grass. "You could leave," she whispered. "You'd be with others like you. You'd be safe." Bruno nudged her knee gently, then rested his head in her lap. She felt the tremble in his body, faint but there. "But I don't want you to go," she admitted, tears brimming in her eyes. "I know I'm not a soldier. I know I'm just a girl from a farm. But I love you, and I think you love me too." In that moment, the decision became clear. Not because it was the easiest, but because it was the most honest. The next morning, Lily handed the letter back to Donovan. "Thank you," she said. "But he's already home." Donovan smiled and nodded. "I figured that'd be your answer." Before he left, he knelt beside Bruno one last time. "You're in good hands, old friend." Bruno licked his hand once, then returned to Lily's side without hesitation. From that day forward, the decision no longer haunted her, because Bruno had made it too. In every step he took to follow her, in every breath he slept beside her, and in every quiet moment, he chose to stay. The weather had been strange all week. Hot winds during the day, sudden chills at night. On the evening it happened, the air hung heavy with pressure, as if the earth itself was waiting for something to break. Lily sat on the porch with Bruno, his head resting against her foot, both of them watching Caleb, her younger brother, chase fireflies across the backyard. His laughter rang out like bells, pure and carefree. Bruno's ears twitched with every squeal, but he stayed calm, alert, always watching. He had become their silent guardian, and Lily trusted him with her whole heart. Inside, her father was fixing a broken cabinet hinge. Lily's mother was still at work. It was just an ordinary night, until it wasn't. 1 second, Caleb was there, running near the old well. The next, he was gone. No scream, no thud, just silence. Lily blinked and stood, her stomach tightening. "Caleb?" she called. No answer. She ran toward the well, heart hammering. "Caleb!" Still nothing. Then came a sharp, desperate bark from behind. The kind Bruno only used when something was very, very wrong. Bruno bolted past her, nose to the ground, tail high. He stopped at the edge of the field and began barking furiously, pacing, circling, then darting forward again. Lily followed him, pushing through the tall grass until she saw them. Footprints, small ones, Caleb's, and beside them, larger ones, adult-sized, heavy, dragging. She gasped. "No! No, no, no!" Panic seized her chest as she turned back toward the house. "Dad!" she screamed. Her father came running, eyes wide. She pointed. "Someone took him!" They didn't wait for police. There was no time. Bruno was already off, following the trail into the woods. Lily and her father sprinted after him, stumbling over roots, brushing past low-hanging branches. The forest was dense, and the shadows moved strangely, like they were hiding something just beyond reach. "Stay close to him!" her father shouted. "He's the only chance we've got!" Bruno barked sharply ahead, then disappeared down a narrow path. The tracks veered deeper into the woods, toward an abandoned logging cabin no one had used in years. As they neared the structure, Lily's father motioned for her to stay low. Bruno crouched beside them, growling low, eyes fixed on the dark doorway. Then came the sound, a whimper. Caleb, muffled, faint, but unmistakable. Her father clenched his jaw. "We go in on 3. But Bruno didn't wait. He surged forward like a bullet, barking wildly, slamming his body against the cabin door. Inside, there was a crash, then yelling. A man's voice, angry, panicked. The door burst open, and Bruno lunged, straight at a tall figure in a tattered coat, holding Caleb by the arm. The man fell backward, shouting as Bruno tackled him to the ground. Caleb broke free, running straight into Lily's arms. She held him tightly, tears pouring down her cheeks. "I've got you! I've got you!" Her father rushed past her and restrained the man, who was now screaming incoherently. But Lily barely noticed. Her world had narrowed to the feel of her brother's heartbeat and the sight of Bruno standing guard, teeth bared, fur raised, daring anyone to come close. Minutes later, flashing lights painted the trees red and blue. Deputies arrived, cuffed the man, and carried him away. The sheriff walked over, shaking his head in disbelief. If your dog hadn't found the trail when he did, this could have ended differently. Lily nodded, still clutching Caleb, whose tears had finally stopped. Bruno stood beside them now, calm again, tail swaying softly. But there was blood on his fur, a deep scratch across his flank. He hadn't walked away unharmed. That night, the house was silent. No one slept. Lily cleaned Bruno's wound with shaking hands, whispering thanks over and over again. "You brought him back," she said through tears. "You didn't even think twice." Bruno rested his head in her lap and closed his eyes. And in that quiet moment, as thunder rumbled far in the distance, Lily realized something that made her heart ache. Bruno hadn't just been trained to protect. He had chosen to love. The sunrise the next morning should have brought peace. The kidnapper was behind bars, Caleb was safe, and the town buzzed with shock and gratitude. But for Lily, the world had narrowed to one thing: the slow, shallow breaths of the German shepherd lying on a folded blanket in their living room. Bruno had been brave. He had been fast. but he hadn't been invincible. His side was torn open from the struggle, and despite Lily's best efforts, the bleeding had been heavier than anyone first realized. His eyes were half-lidded now, not from fear, but from exhaustion, from pain. The vet had arrived within the hour, her face grim. She examined the wound gently, checking Bruno's pulse, running her fingers over his ribs. "He's stable," she finally said, "but just barely. He needs surgery, soon." Lily's father paced the room while her mother called every clinic within driving distance. The closest emergency animal hospital was hours away, and they didn't have the kind of money these places charged. "We'll figure it out," her father said through clenched teeth. "He saved my son. I won't let him die on this floor." Word spread quickly. The sheriff told the town what had happened, how the girl's dog had tracked a kidnapper through the woods and fought him off alone. By that afternoon, people started showing up. First, it was the grocer with a $50 bill, then the librarian, then the local mechanic. Within 2 hours, the dining table was full of envelopes, loose bills, and handwritten notes. For the hero dog. "Tell him we're praying. He's one of us now." People who had once whispered about Lily behind her back were now knocking on her door with tears in their eyes. Lily never left Bruno's side. She stroked his paw gently, whispered stories into his ears, reminded him of every walk they had taken, every quiet morning they had shared. "You can't leave yet," she whispered. "You haven't even seen the first snow." His tail thumped once in response, weak but real, her eyes filled with tears. "That's right. Stay with me. Just a little longer." As the vet prepared to transport him, Bruno lifted his head, just slightly, and locked eyes with Lily. No fear, just trust. The same look he gave her when she first called him Bruno. The drive to the animal hospital was long and silent. Lily sat in the back of the truck with Bruno's head in her lap, her father driving faster than he ever had. The sky darkened with clouds, and the wind howled through the trees like a warning. "You're gonna be okay," she kept repeating. "You're gonna be okay." When they arrived, the vet team rushed him in. Doors swung open, machines beeped, then they were gone, and Lily was left in the waiting room, holding the medallion in her trembling hands. Hours passed. Her father brought her tea, but she didn't drink it. Her eyes were fixed on the door. Every time it opened, her heart stopped. Finally, a doctor stepped out, his scrubs stained, his face unreadable. "He made it through surgery," he said gently. "It was close, but he fought hard." Lily burst into tears, unable to speak. The doctor smiled. "You've got a fighter." The next morning, Bruno opened his eyes slowly as Lily entered the recovery room. He lifted his head just enough to see her, and when he did, his tail gave one slow wag. Lily rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside him. "You came back," she whispered. "You stayed." She pressed her forehead to his. "You're not just a good dog, you're the best." News of Bruno's sacrifice spread far beyond town limits. Reporters called, a local paper ran the headline, "The dog who saved a life and nearly lost his own." But for Lily, the spotlight didn't matter. What mattered was the soft rise and fall of Bruno's chest, the feel of his paw in her hand, and the knowledge that their bond had been sealed by something no one could deny. Bruno hadn't just fought for her family. He had bled for them. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm linen. Bruno lay curled in a padded recovery bed, stitches lining his flank like a scarred road map. Tubes delivered fluids, monitors blinked quietly. But the most comforting sight of all was the little girl curled up next to him, Lily, sound asleep with her hand wrapped gently around his paw. Nurses paused every time they passed the door, smiling. It had become a sort of sacred space, where a hero was healing and where love had refused to let go. The town hadn't stopped talking. For the first time in years, the local bulletin board overflowed with notes of gratitude and get-well cards, not for a politician or a pastor, but for a dog. "Bruno the Brave," one card read. Another said, "We didn't believe until now? Thank you." The donations kept pouring in. School children held a bake sale. The diner added a tip jar labeled "For Bruno's Bones." Even the mayor showed up, carrying a handmade certificate of bravery. It wasn't official, but it was sincere. Lily couldn't believe it. These were the same people who had once scoffed when she walked through town, holding a $5 leash. The same voices that had laughed when she called the injured dog her best friend. But now, They stopped her on the street. They asked about his health. They looked her in the eye and said, "You saw something in him we didn't." Her heart swelled with pride, but not for herself. For Bruno, because he had earned it. Every tear, every cheer, every gesture of gratitude, he had earned it all. As the days passed, Bruno grew stronger. First, he lifted his head without effort. Then, he ate a full bowl of food. By the end of the week, he stood, wobbly but tall, and took a few steps across the room. Lily cheered and clapped, tears sliding down her cheeks. The nurses clapped too. "He's ready," one of them said. "He just needed someone to fight for." The vet nodded in agreement. That girl gave him a reason to live. Now he's returning the favor. When the day finally came to bring him home, the entire town gathered at the park. The sheriff led the event, wearing his best uniform. A small wooden stage had been built, and beside it, a red carpet made of old quilts stitched together by local families. Lily walked Bruno down that carpet, his stitches still visible, but his eyes full of life. He didn't limp anymore. He didn't flinch when people clapped. He simply walked, proud and strong, his head held high. When they reached the stage, the sheriff raised his hand for silence. "We gather today not just to honor a dog," he said, voice thick with emotion, "but to honor courage, loyalty, and the unspoken love that exists between a protector and the one they choose to protect." He knelt and presented a new collar, handcrafted leather, with a silver tag etched with one word: Hero. Lily placed it around Bruno's neck, her hands trembling, her smile uncontainable. The crowd erupted in applause. Bruno stood still, tail wagging softly, then gave a single bark as if to say, "Thank you." After the ceremony, Lily sat with him under the old oak tree where everything had once started, where he had dug into the mud, where he had remembered something painful. Now, that place held something new: peace. She pulled a folded piece of paper from her pocket. It was a drawing she'd made, Bruno with angel wings, standing guard in front of a little farmhouse. She showed it to him. "That's what you are," she whispered, "my angel." Bruno leaned into her, letting out a long, contented sigh. Around them, the town began to scatter, the crowd thinning. But for Lily, the world had gone still again, just like the moment she first saw him at that dusty auction. Except now, she knew what she had done wasn't just an act of kindness. It was the start of something that would change everything. Bruno had been broken. She had been invisible. But together, they had found something rare and real: a second chance. 2 weeks had passed since the town's celebration, but the story of Bruno the Brave had continued to ripple far beyond the county lines. News stations aired interviews with Lily. Photos of the quiet girl and her once injured German shepherd had gone viral, spreading across the country. People called him the miracle dog. Others called her the girl with the $5 heart. But neither Lily nor Bruno cared about the attention. They preferred their mornings quiet, on the porch swing, watching birds, with Bruno's head resting on her lap, and Lily humming softly to him, like always. Then, one afternoon, a black SUV pulled into the driveway. A sharply dressed man stepped out, flanked by 2 officers in crisp military attire. Lily's father opened the door, brows raised. "We're not in trouble, are we?" he asked with a half smile. The man chuckled. "Not at all, sir. We're here to give thanks." Lily stepped out cautiously, and Bruno followed close behind her, tail swaying. The man's eyes softened as he looked at the dog. "That tattoo," he said quietly. "We never thought we'd see it again." He introduced himself as Major Wells from the United States Military Working Dog Program. This dog saved lives overseas. He completed missions with zero margin for error, but after an ambush in Kandahar, he disappeared. We thought he was lost forever. He knelt in front of Bruno and whispered, "Welcome back, soldier." Bruno looked up at Lily, then slowly walked forward and placed a paw gently into the Major's hand. The entire moment felt like something out of a dream, like pieces of the past had finally aligned with the present. Major Wells stood and turned to Lily. "You gave him something we never could. Not training, not discipline, but peace." He reached into a velvet box and opened it slowly. Inside was a silver medal engraved with Bruno's military ID and a small gold star. "This is the Distinguished Service Animal Medal," the Major said. "It's rarely awarded, but it belongs to him. and to you for bringing him back." He handed the medal to Lily, who stared at it with wide, trembling eyes. "I didn't do anything," she whispered. "I just saw him when no one else would." "You did everything," the major replied. "Without you, he never would have made it home." They pinned the medal onto Bruno's new collar. Cameras clicked, and someone applauded softly. Bruno didn't react with showmanship. He didn't bark or pose. He simply sat, eyes alert, calm and composed, just like he always had. A soldier, through and through. But as Lily wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "I'm so proud of you," he leaned his head into her shoulder and let out a deep, soft sigh, the kind of sigh that only comes from someone who knows they've finally come full circle. Later that evening, the porch was quiet again. The reporters had left. The military men had saluted and driven away. But the medal still shimmered on Bruno's chest, catching the last rays of the setting sun. Lily ran her fingers across the engraved letters slowly. "I think this medal is yours more than mine," she whispered. "But I'm glad I get to share it with you." Bruno licked her hand once, then lay beside her with a deep, contented groan. His body was older, his limp still slight, but his eyes were clear now, bright, steady. Her father stepped onto the porch, carrying a tray with tea and biscuits. He looked at them for a moment before saying, "You know, I used to think that $5 was a mistake. Now I think it's the best money this family ever spent." Lily smiled, resting her head against Bruno's shoulder. He was never for sale. He was just waiting to be seen. And that was the miracle. Not just that Bruno had survived, not just that he had fought and saved lives, but that somehow, in a world filled with noise and neglect, a little girl with nothing more than a crumpled bill had seen a broken soldier and a dirt-covered dog, and had given him a reason to stay alive. The first snowfall came gently that year. Tiny flakes floated through the gray sky, settling softly on fence posts, window sills, and the barn roof. Lily stood by the porch railing, bundled in a knitted scarf, watching the world turn white. Beside her, Bruno sat with his eyes lifted toward the falling snow. His breath came in quiet puffs, his ears twitching at the faint rustle of wind through the trees. It was the first snow he had ever seen with her, and just as she had promised, he had lived to see it. They didn't speak, but they didn't need to. Some silences are warm and full, like a blanket shared between hearts that understand one another without words. Bruno nudged her hand gently, and Lily smiled, her eyes misting. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she whispered. "Not just the snow, everything. Everything since the day I found you." He looked up at her then, calm, loyal, steady, and leaned into her side. She wrapped an arm around him, resting her head against his broad shoulder. Later that afternoon, they took a walk through the field behind the barn. The snow had blanketed the ground in shimmering white, untouched except for their footsteps. Lily led the way slowly, careful not to slip, while Bruno padded beside her with ease, the limp in his leg now barely noticeable. They reached the old oak tree, the one where he had first remembered his past. This time, he didn't growl, he didn't shiver, he just stood still, taking it all in, as if something that had once been heavy inside him had finally let go. Lily sat beneath the tree, brushing snow off a patch of grass. Bruno lay down beside her, and for a while, they just watched the flakes fall in slow spirals. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something she'd been carrying for weeks. A letter, written in her careful, slanted handwriting. She unfolded it and read aloud, her voice soft and slow. "Dear Bruno, I thought I was the one who saved you that day at the auction, but now I know it was you who saved me first." Her voice trembled, but she kept reading. "You taught me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that silence can speak louder than words, that love doesn't have to be loud or perfect, it just has to be real. Before you, I didn't know how strong I could be, I didn't know I mattered, but you looked at me like I was worth fighting for, and I think that's the greatest gift anyone's ever given me." She stopped, tears brimming in her eyes. Bruno rested his head on her lap and let out a deep, peaceful sigh. As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky in soft orange and lavender hues, Lily whispered the last words of her letter. "Thank you for choosing me, even when you didn't have to. I'll never stop choosing you back." She folded the letter and placed it under a rock at the base of the oak, a secret tribute shared only between the two of them. Bruno's tail thumped once against the ground, slow and content. That night, they returned to the house where her father had lit a fire and her mother had made hot cocoa. Bruno curled beside the hearth, the glow dancing across his fur, and Lily lay beside him with a blanket draped over them both. Her mother kissed the top of her head. "You two found each other for a reason," she said. "Sometimes the universe doesn't make sense until it gives you someone who does." As the fire crackled and the snow continued falling outside, Lily looked at the old collar they'd kept on the mantle, the one from the day she bought him, the frayed rope, the rusted clasp. It was a symbol of how far they'd come, from forgotten to honored, from feared to beloved, from broken to whole. And as she drifted to sleep, her hand resting on Bruno's back, Lily understood one final truth. Some rescues don't come with sirens or headlines. Some come on quiet feet, with wounded eyes and silent loyalty. And sometimes, when you spend $5 at a forgotten auction, you don't just save a life, you find your own.